Guy jumps out of the bushes, puts a gun to my head. I quickly turn, real quick, and I hear the gun go off. I remember falling down on this girl's lap, and I started bleeding out all over the place. These girls are screaming. I remember hearing like this loud buzzing noise in my head. The bullet went into the back of my head. I can't move, so I'm thinking like, man, I'm paralyzed. When I'm on her lap, I could see the mirror, and I can see this person in the back of the truck trying to reload the gun. He's trying to come back and finish me off. And next thing you know, I'm in this place. And all of a sudden, I hear this voice, and it says,
"You're about to hear from a man who grew up surrounded by violence. He got deeply involved in gang wars, and he built a reputation that put a target on his back. John Paul Martinez was shot in the head at point-blank range, but he didn't die. What followed, he believes, was a near-death experience, a life review, terrifying place of darkness, and then these unexplained moments that kept appearing throughout his life. But these moments weren't random. They led John Paul somewhere he never imagined."
I come from a very broken family, very dysfunctional. Besides my mother and father fighting all the time and arguing, there was molestation that I went through as well as a young kid, and it affected me. I was just confused about what was happening to me in the home. And I still had to deal with the things of my mother and father. You know, there was cheating, there was lying. With all this stuff that I was dealing with inwardly, I needed to find a way to deal with it. I started taking off from school. My mother would send me to an after-school program. I wouldn't show up. I go somewhere else, and then come home late. I was a young kid. I was just really confused and hurt. The divorce thing was going on within my family. And I ended up going to court one day. And the judge made a decision for me to stay with my mother for a season. And that's when things started snowballing. I started, getting aggressive. I started doing what I want as a young kid. And my mother couldn't handle it. And she shipped me off to my father. At this time, the divorce was final. And my father moved to the city of Rialto, California. My father became a womanizer, after the divorce. So I would see so many different women come through that door on a weekly basis when he would be home. Sometimes my father wouldn't come home on the weekends. And I learned how to fend for myself as a young kid. And there was times where I felt really lonely. I felt abandoned. I felt like I wasn't protected as a young kid. And at the top of the block, there were some kids, they would hang out. So I started getting involved with them. Some of these kids would take off. One Friday night, I ended up going with them. And it was a backyard party in the city of Rialto. Something that intrigued me is that there was a group of individuals in the corner, bald head, tattoos, baggy pants. This was different for me. But the thing that really pulled me to that was because it seemed like they had a camaraderie or a brotherhood. They're really tight with each other. And it seemed like everybody else in that party feared those individuals. I've kind of made my way over to them and introduced myself and started talking to them. So I started going more and more to these parties. And there was an accident that happened. Two of the guys from the neighborhood, from that gang, they passed away. So they had a celebration of life. And then after that, they had kind of a reception. And when I went to the reception, I started thinking to myself, well, maybe I could replace one of those guys, or maybe I could replace two of those guys. You got to understand at this time, that gang, South Rialto, was the biggest gang in that city. I mean, you're talking hundreds of members. And at that time, everybody's drinking, partying. People are, they're upset. They just lost their homeboy. And I thought to myself, well, this is a perfect time for me to get jumped in. So we took this picture. We got all together. And I said, you know what? I'm going to throw up a gang sign. And I wasn't from that gang yet. And I remember throwing up the gang sign. It was the Polaroid. So, what I mean? You take the picture and then you kind of flap it against the wind and you develop faster. And I remember sitting down in a chair and seeing them passing around this picture, and they started talking to each other. Hey, he's not even for the neighborhood, and he's throwing, the neighborhood sign. So I'm sitting there in a chair. All of a sudden, I just get a hit, boom, in the side of my face. the side of my face, I fall from the chair and I start fighting with two guys. I'm like 12 years old. I'm 12 years old, so I'm not big, but I remember taking off my shirt. And so I walk into the street, man, and everybody's there. You're talking, there's like maybe about 100 people there. And I'm like, hey, come jump me in, come on. So we go across the street and I go into the backyard and there's about 12 or 13 guys. And I remember just going into there and just hitting two people. Boom, boom. Next thing you know, I'm on the floor. And then after it's done, I remember them like kind of like helping me up from the floor. And I remember everybody coming and hugging me. But when they hugged me, I felt like, I belonged to something finally in my life. I felt like protected. And I remember one of them saying, hey, we got your back now. You're part of the neighborhood, let's do this and stuff. That's when my journey began in the gang. And I was like 12, maybe 13 years old at this time. I remember just stealing cars, hanging out with the homies, putting in work, amongst other gangs that were in the neighborhood. And this was something that I enjoyed. And, I had a bald head, big pants on, different things like that. And I remember my father asking me one day, he said, what's up, man? You're never home no more. And you're out there, you're doing whatever you want to do. This isn't a hotel or a motel where you can come anywhere you want to. I need to know, what is it going to be? He's like, is it going to be your family or is it going to be the gang? I was just engulfed in the gang, putting in work, started using drugs. All this stuff, started selling drugs. I was just like, well, it's going to be the gang. Eventually, I started doing time as a young kid, juvenile hall time, getting out and stuff, then getting busted again. You're talking about robbery, burglary. And I started going to the camps and different places like as a young kid. I get out and, I'd go see my homies. I thought it was like the coolest thing because they're just like, hey, we heard that you handled your business out here. You did your time. I was earning stripes in the neighborhood. I just wanted the notoriety within the gang. And at that time of my life, my family was getting hurt in the process, but I really didn't care. I want to see the homies. I want to kick it. There's some girls on the next block. So I go see the homies first and I want to go over there. And so I start getting loaded and drunk. The crazy thing, it seemed like a movie that night. It was foggy, it was cold. The street was dark. I remember like in the bushes, like a little bit farther down, there was noise that night. And I was just like, oh, it's nothing. Don't worry about it. You're solid. You just got out. Don't start tripping on stuff. Anyways, like about 1:30, I was telling these girls, hey, just take me home. Take me to my pad. So I jump in the car. I'm on the right side of this truck. And then there's a girl next to me in the driver. And all of a sudden, when we start backing out and we go forward, this guy jumps out of the bushes. When I was out there in the streets, boy, let me tell you, I was out there putting in work, against our enemies, and had a lot of like respect for my homeboys, but also had a lot of people that wanted me dead because of things I was doing. So this night, that guy jumps out of the bushes. And you're talking about like, this is like my first day out of prison. Guy jumps out of the bushes, puts a gun to my head. I'm sitting in the car, and I quickly turn, real quick, and I hear the gun go off. I remember falling down to this girl's lap, and I started bleeding out all over the place. I mean, there was like, my shirt was like soaked. These girls are screaming, right? And I remember hearing like this loud buzzing noise in my head. The bullet went into the back of my head and got lodged in the back of my head. And so when I'm down on this girl's lap, I can't move. So I'm thinking like, man, I'm paralyzed. When I'm on her lap, I could see the mirror and I can see this person in the back of the truck trying to reload the gun. So I tell these girls, we got to leave, go. He's trying to come back and finish me off. I remember running red light and them taking me to the hospital, and they put me into the gurney. I'm going down this corridor and I'm looking up and I can see all the lights going down the corridor of this hospital. So I go into the back and they hook me up and they're talking to me, and I can hear my heartbeat like beeping like super fast. I remember the Rialto Police Department coming into the room and they're trying to ask me questions, and I got like, I can't talk and say anything. But I remember this, one of the officers, I remember, grabs my hand and he tells me, hey, you're going to be okay. You'll be all right, man. He said, whatever you do, He's like, don't go to sleep. Stay with me. Stay with me. And, on the way to the hospital, I did have a moment. When we started moving past the stop sign, something came up. It was crazy. It seemed like a slide. There was like a slide, and in the slide, it was pictures or memories of my life. I'm seeing them in my head, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm dying. I must be dying. And I started getting, fear came over me. But then I experienced all these things. And then like in these slides, there was a whole bunch, and a lot of them. And I felt every emotion, if it was happiness or whatever, in every single slide. And there was moments from my life as a young kid to my present day, and I felt every single one of them. The emotion, all the things that happened, the experiences, like really fast. So now I'm in the hospital. I hear my heartbeat going really fast. I started feeling really cold. I was shaking. And so they put covers on me. And then all of a sudden I started feeling really tired. And this guy's telling me, this officer, don't go to sleep. Don't go to sleep. I could hear my heartbeat going from fast, like beep, 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 to like this, to like beep, beep. And next thing you know, I'm in this place. And it's dark. It's super dark, and there's nobody there. Or at least I thought there was nobody there. But it was dark, and all these emotions were coming over me, like abandonment, loneliness, separation. It's hard to explain all that stuff, but I felt all that stuff in this place. And then this fear came over me. In my life, I've fought some pretty big dudes, and I had some fear come over me. This fear was a different type of fear. It was like a quenching fear, and I've never felt any type of fear like this before. I started getting like really scared, but there was something behind me. It was pushing me, and I tried to resist it, but it kept on pushing me into the deeper darkness. And it seemed like there were stages of darkness in this place where I was at. As I went into the deeper darkness, like the fear got even greater. I heard people, and at first I thought it was people laughing and rejoicing. But as I got closer, it was actually people screaming for help. And I can remember this one guy, like in the deeper darkness, this guy was saying, help me, help me, help me. And I remember I started shaking. Next thing you know, I woke up and I started going to like convulsions on the tape. They had to like strap me down because what was happening to me. I know that I had an experience, but I couldn't share this experience with anybody, especially my homeboys, because my homeboys would have been like, oh man, you're tripping. But I knew that I had an experience. I knew something had happened to me. A week later, I get out of the hospital. I go home and my father's there. And I just remember my father falling to his knees and crying. And then he goes, I feel so guilty about all this stuff that's going on. He's like, if I would have never moved here, none of this would have happened to you. And so when I saw him hurting like that, my first thing was like, I almost started crying. And then I got myself together and I started thinking about payback. The police were always after me. They're like, Martinez, you're done. You're finished. You're washed up. You'll do life in prison. I didn't care. I hadn't manned up. I hadn't even been a father to my children. I didn't even keep a job. I didn't know how to do any of those things, but I knew how to do time. So this time when I went to prison, you're talking 2005, there's a lot of things that are going on at this time. And I received another kite. This from a prison gang. And on the note, it said that I had to kill somebody. I had to make sure that they were dead. So this time when I went to prison, at that time, this is when Arnold Schwarzenegger was in office. And there was something called a Miranda Act. Basically, if you hadn't seen board and they didn't file charges against you in 45 days, then they had to kick you out. It's the 44th day. I'm talking to the CEO, knocking on my cell door. asking the CO, like, hey, what's going on? It's tomorrow's going to be my 45th day. What's going to happen? And she goes, I have no idea. I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I got to handle this, the next day. So I remember late at night, my cell pops open. The CO comes up to the door and says, Martinez, all your charges have been dropped. You're being released. And I started tripping, man, because you have to think, like, the next day I had to kill somebody. I ended up getting released that night. No parole hold, no nothing. My mother, she was faithfully right me when I was in prison, the only one. And she goes, when you get out, she's like, just do me one favor, come see me. I go, I knock on the door, I remember like the person she was staying with. So at this time, like I had my whole face tattooed. I got laser treatment, I still got a couple and stuff, but I got, I had it all over my face. I knock, person opens the door and she's like, who are you? I'm John. You don't remember me? She's like, you're John? Oh yeah. She's like, you can't stay here. And she closed the door. And next thing you know, my mom opens the door with a bag. She's like, come on, let's go. We had so-called cousins or family that stood like in the city of Whittier. And that night we ended up knocking on doors. And when they all saw me, they're like, you can't stay here. We can't have you here. We got a motel that night. And I remember we talked till like maybe 3 or 4 in the morning because she knew eventually I was going to go back to the drugs, go back to the gang. And she said, look, before you go back, just do me one thing. Go check in with your parole officer. I said, all right, cool. My parole officer was missing that day. And there was another officer. And I remember him sitting down and he goes, aren't you just tired? You've been doing this for how long now? It's like a vicious cycle for you. You're getting involved in some things you probably shouldn't be involved in. You're going to learn one day that those people that say they have your back, they're going to turn their back on you. They're going to end up killing you. What are you going to do? He goes, look, if you're tired and you're sick and tired of being tired, here's a phone number. And I'm like, what's this to? And he goes, it's to a home. It's a men's home. It's a place you can stay, if you're tired. And I go, no, I'm good. And I asked him, I said, well, where's this at? He goes, it's right here in the city of Whittier. But let me tell you, it's a Christian men's home. And I started laughing. I said, a Christian men's home? I'm like, are you serious? I jump in the car. I have that phone number. I take off my mom. We're on the freeway. And then all of a sudden I have a moment. I'm sitting there in the car with my mom, and we end up going the wrong way or something. I'm telling her, I'm like, hey, you're going the wrong way. You're supposed to go to San Bernardino. And all of a sudden I hear this voice. And it says, for the wages of sin is death. And when that hit me, that fear came over me again. The fear that I experienced when I was shot in the head, that same fear came over. I remember I just started crying in the car. I start crying in the car. My mom's like, what's going on with you? I said, you know what? I can't do it no more. Pull over, get off the freeway or whatever. Take me to a phone booth. At that time, there's no cell phones. We had to get to a phone booth. I had to put in a quarter. I remember calling this men's home. And so I explained, I'm like, hey, I just got out of prison. I got nowhere to go. Do you guys have room? And he goes, look, we're full, but for you, we'll make room. And I was like, okay. I'm like, I'll be there. And I told my mom, I had nothing. I had a bag of hygiene, couple razors, toothpaste, but I had no clothes, no nothing. Every time I went to prison, I'd lose all that stuff. My mom takes me to this men's home right here in the city of Whittier. I go up to this wrought iron fence, and I see these 2 guys coming towards the wrought iron fence. Guys are all patting down, bald heads. They're like, welcome. We just made room for you in the back. So I remember opening up the fence and one of the guys reached out and hugged me. And to be honest, I'm not a hugger. So like, it was really weird, man. It was really weird. And he's just like, love you, brother. And I was just like, but to be honest with you, it was like the hug, it seemed genuine. Like it came from a place of care and a place of love. Throughout the neighborhood, I would have moments of feeling satisfied, of having, my homeboys, feeling protected. But then there's other times I just felt still alone, still seeking for something. But when this kind of like happened to me, I felt that protection and I felt that love when he did that to me. And I remember them taking me into this back room And I'm sitting there next to a washer and dryer. And these guys are like, you want to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? It took me probably a couple of months to really put both feet in and really completely surrender to the Lord. Opening up the Bible, reading things about forgiving others, loving people. That was something I just didn't do. My heart was cold because, being in the neighborhood, from the things that you see and do, your heart becomes like full of wickedness. Your mentality is like in left field. So reading this stuff and then dealing with this, knowing that I did all these horrible things in my life, when it came to burglary, robbery, holding people up, destroying my family, seeing them crying and stuff like that. And then reading that I can be forgiven. I'm like, you can forgive me, God? For all those things that I did. And it was hard. It was hard to accept that. All the crazy things I did, and to understand that Jesus forgave me for all that stuff. He washed it all away with his blood, and then I understood like the cross, the death, the burial, the resurrection. I started understanding what all that meant. And I remember we pray in the sanctuary. I go into the sanctuary and pray with these guys, and probably about 8 months into my walk, we're fasting, we're praying and all this different things. And I'm surrendered to God. I'm on fire. I'm on fire in this home. I'm teaching Bible studies now and sitting down with God and asking him, what is it you want me to do? I want to do your will. I'm surrendered. What is it? And he took me to the book of Isaiah. I believe it's 61. It says, where the Spirit of the Lord is upon thee, and I've anointed thee to preach the gospel. And I said to myself, me, uneducated, not trained, 8th grade, in and out of prison, drug addict, alcoholic, all these different things, came to me again. But still, he called me. Regardless of all that stuff, that's no longer who I was. That was my prior life. I'm living this new life now in Christ, and I felt like it was an honor. This is 2005 when I got saved. Fast forward now, 2026, with ministry, doing all these different things that I've done throughout the years. You're talking about over 17,000 people I've brought into the Lord now through sharing my story like I'm doing here, today, through preaching the gospel, being part of ministry, and to know that God pulled me out of darkness. I tried many things in my life, but it wasn't until I went with Jesus that he completely pulled me out of all those things.
Wow. That was incredible. You've obviously had, you describe them as moments. For me, these are just like supernatural, divine experiences you've clearly had. You had the first one where you almost died, you were in the dark place, and then you got brought back. You were in the car and you heard God's voice. But you also had experiences where some friends, even back in the hood, would come to you with a message from God. What did they say?
I would have homeboys, that would get saved. Man, I'd be at the pad. I'd be getting loaded, gun in my waistband, and all of a sudden I hear a knock. Boom, 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 boom. I'd be like, who is it? And when they would say their names, I already knew like, oh man, he's going to try to take me to church. What is he going to do? So I remember I opened the door one day, and my friend Joe Gonzalez, we used to call him Wino. He went home to be with the Lord recently, but I remember this guy, man, would never give up on me, man. He would see me in the neighborhood. He'd tell me about Jesus. Come on, I'm going to take you home. So he comes to my house. I open the door, and he goes, me and my church have been praying and fasting, and God spoke to me. And I'm sitting there with a beer in my hand, been up all night partying with the homies, gun in my waistband. He's like, yeah, God spoke to me, and he has a plan for you. He said he has a plan for you. And I remember stepping back. Outwardly, I had a front, but inwardly, it wrecked me. Because to be honest with you, man, I was hurt. I was hurt. I was very broken. And he tells me that. And I said to myself, well, if God has a plan for me, then why am I here? why am I here, in addiction? I just break out of prison. If he has a plan for me, when is he going to pull me out? Things like that happened throughout my life. It was just God, he planted seed in me. He planted seed in me that day. So when I got out of the home, this guy, he was one of the first people I called. I'm like, hey, man, thank you for never giving up on me. He had enough courage to come knock on my door and tell me that God had a plan for me.